I'm Taylor Like. I'm a senior product manager here at Scale Computing. I'm primarily responsible for the Fleet Manager product, which is why they stuck me on stage here in front of all of you. And by stuck, I mean, this is my favorite thing to talk about. So I'm really glad you're all here. Let's get going. I know it's the afternoon, so I will try to be high energy. I'm going to try to be a little interactive where I can. So right off the bat, I was curious if you could take out your phones and use this QR code to answer a very simple survey question, which is, do you currently have a Fleet Manager subscription? Yes, no, and there is an unsure option. I will be following up with you later if you select that one, but don't be shy if that's the reality. So obviously, I'm sure there will be a lot of yeses. If your answer is no, I don't think you're in the wrong room. I'm happy to have you here. We'll try to cover, a wide array. We're going to cover a little bit of just what Fleet Manager is, but we're going to spend most of our time talking about what's new since last platform, and of course, what's coming in the next year. Awesome. All right, that's really helpful. Thank you. So, did you answer yes? I have more QR codes for you. I want QR code happy. The URLs are also there if you want to type it in or you already have it bookmarked. If you said yes, log in, follow along. I'm going to be sharing some things that are live as of today. So that could be helpful. If you're unsure, you can try to recover your password if you've created it. If you're not even sure if you've created it, you could also look in your inbox for a welcome email. Or again, I'll have these survey results and I'll probably be reaching out. Okay, there were a few no's, right? So I'm going to start off with the classics of Fleet Manager. So Fleet Manager was launched about 3 years ago. And so this morning in the roadmap, there's a lot of talk about Fleet Manager, but not a lot of showing of Fleet Manager. So just to level set, here's the dashboard. You get an overall view of your fleet. You get the clusters, you get the conditions, you get the VMs, all in real time. So it's a cloud-hosted SaaS product from Scale to you. So it's not just monitoring though. Obviously, the first step in deploying SD platform is getting that cluster up and running. And so Fleet Manager helps you with that as well. So we call it zero-touch provisioning or ZTP. And so most of the people in this room, even if you've not used Fleet Manager, have probably stood up a cluster, right? So you unboxed your clusters, you're excited, you got the cool swag card in there, but then you have to find a monitor and a keyboard and plug them into the nodes, first node, second node, third node, back to the first node. Hope you didn't screw up anything you entered. I always do, personally. Whereas with ZTP, it's just one form field in Fleet Manager. You can even do it in advance of receiving that hardware. So we're reducing data entry, and when you reduce data entry, you reduce data entry errors, right? So you really can speed up by 90% by eliminating those physical elements and just the typing. Finally, SecureLink is probably one of the core features that we discovered based on user feedback very, very early on. So this is like the big first feature post-launch was SecureLink. So you could get VPN-less remote access to your clusters that was baked into HyperCore from the beginning. And so you can access your remote sites when you're here or when you're at the beach is always my favorite example. I personally don't like to check clusters at the beach, but if you have to, SecureLink is a nice option for that. All right, so that's a baseline. Now we're moving into the contemporary after we covered the classics. So I'm going to stop pacing on the stage and let's go live so we can get away from the slideware a little bit. Now, sorry, it's not video time yet, but I should be sharing my Google Chrome. It is a lot of icons. All right. Just imagine what my tool, looks like. Okay. I think if I move it over, all right, we're really doing it live here. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me. So, we've done a lot in the last year, obviously, and by we, I mean not me, the Fleet Manager team who may be in here. They're awesome. But one of the things I wanted to share with you all was in the users page. So we've gotten a lot of feedback as Fleet Manager's gotten more functionality that obviously there's an increased importance for security. So from day one, we offered the option to log in with Google or Microsoft and not just a password. But in the last year, based on customer feedback, we also added this ability to enforce your auth method. And so one thing to call out here is that Fleet Manager is a multi-tenant application. So when I log in as taylor@scalecomputing.com, I log into not just one org, but all the orgs that I'm user of with that one authorization. But now, as an admin of your org, you can enforce, hey, look, we have Entra ID, and so you're not just going to use the same password used for everything. You're going to use SSO. You're going to get all the benefits that are baked into that, like IP whitelisting, MFA, what have you, the centralized logging that comes with IDPs. So I would strongly recommend this feature. It's not the most exciting, but I wanted to call it out because security is rarely exciting, but always important. We take it seriously, and so we hope you'll take advantage of that feature. So one other thing, and this was teased at the roadmap this morning, was VM metrics. So here on the VMs page, this is an aggregated view of all your VMs across all your clusters, searchable, sortable, etc. And now you can dive into the details of any VM. And in addition to seeing, this is what you're familiar with from the HyperCore cluster UI, but it's all on one screen. You can see snapshot size, you can see cores, RAM, etc. And of course, now you can also see the VM metrics. And VM metrics will go back quite a bit in time, so you can see the CPU, RAM, and the storage. So you can see runaway storage, you can see CPU utilization is very high, I better go in, add a core or two. And then the RAM also doubles actually as you can see shutdowns. So obviously a shutdown VM is using 0 RAM. So this is a great troubleshooting tool. And of course, you also get to use SecureLink to go directly to the VM console if you wish, or you can jump over to the cluster and SecureLink to the cluster UI generally that way. So in addition to that troubleshooting, you also have a new top 8 view. So this is on a cluster. You can see which things are running away. So if something's just pegged at 100%, you can then go in there, add a few cores to that VM. Or on a smaller cluster, actually the majority of HyperCore clusters have around 8 VMs, especially at our edge deployments. Obviously, those larger data center MSP clusters, that's not the case, but this does a lot towards seeing, hey, my cluster CPU is really high. Like, what is going on there? And in this one view, you can pretty quickly assess that. And it's not just CPU, of course. There's a selector up here, so you can also see RAM and storage. One thing that's really cool about this, obviously, it's fun to see the different colors in the UI and play with the timelines, and that's convenient. But one of the features, the last contemporary feature I want to share, is actually the one I'm most excited about. And that is in settings here, you now have access to the Fleet Manager API. So in here, you can create an API key. You can say, let's say platform rules with a Z, and you can select a role. So these are the same roles as you have for users. So if you're using this API key just to pull a report, you can then therefore limit the role of that API key. Again, keeping security in mind. So I've got my cluster viewer and I got my key, copy that. And of course, I'll never be able to see that key again, but you can have any number of keys you want. You can remove the old ones as needed. And then there's a link right here to the Swagger documentation. And you can just paste in that key you made, and you can start playing with the API right here without having to go to another tool. Although, of course, you can use the tool of choice for you, whether that be Postman or Insomnia, etc. So Fleet Manager API, obviously showing this here. It's a Swagger doc, open API. So if you're familiar with APIs, you should have all the tools you need here to get started. But more exciting than showing you this, I want to share some examples of what people have made with the Fleet Manager API. All right, now can I negotiate my way back into the PowerPoint? We shall see. I cannot. Okay, bear with me. All right. They made me do practice, but it was in a different room, and so I'm useless here. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm going to skip through. We're going to get back to where we were. We're going through the contemporaries. All right. This is cool because most of the time when you're making a product like we do, this is the flow. We design it, we engineer it, we test it, and it works and gets used exactly the way we designed and tested it. But with the API, it's really a toolkit for you. And so we get to see the creativity of our customers. So the API has been available for early access for a couple months now. So these are actually real examples of projects that customers have shared with me. And I really hope that some of you will take inspiration from. Please copy them. I'm sure they would love that. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So this one is a Zabbix dashboard. Zabbix is a very popular open source solution, but there are lots of alternatives. You can use Datadog or Prometheus plus Grafana. And so this customer, who is a European manufacturer with 13 sites, they made their own, really like a custom Fleet Manager dashboard. So they're pulling that from the Fleet Manager API. And as a result, they get the views that they want. They get historical sense of these metrics, and they even have custom alerts firing out of this. The next project I wanted to share was a case integration with ServiceNow. We co-opted this for the roadmap session this morning, but that was a real implementation that a large European retailer did. So they're on an hourly basis going to the conditions endpoint, and they're seeing all the critical conditions, and they're creating cases in ServiceNow. And they whipped this up. Like, I gave them access, and the next day they were like, yeah, this is what I did. Done. And again, that was not an engineer. That was not a developer. Finally, this is a PowerShell module that was created by, I can call him out here because he put it on GitHub, Jesse Wolcott. He's from Royal Farms. You'll all meet him tomorrow morning. He's awesome, and so go check that out. He'd love it if you contributed or stole it from him. And then after seeing all those cool projects, I was like, I can't let them beat me. Like, I'm the product manager for the API. So I set myself a little challenge, and I was beaten, obviously, but this is pretty cool. So we again use this in the roadmap presentation, but I'll go into a little more detail right now. So with AI coding, I've learned to not have any fear, really. And I put in example requests and responses for metrics, and I said, what if I could write a script that would pull down the metrics that we just showed and actually predict if and when a resource is going to run out? Like, that's certainly feasible. I took math classes. Like, this is possible. I'm not a developer, though, so like, that really, that sucks. But with my LLM of choice, which happens to be Gemini, I put in the requests, the responses, my goals, and then we collaborated. We tussled for a little bit. But in the end, we were able to do me and the LLM, personifying it. We were able to do a weighted linear regression that looks at the data pulled from Fleet Manager API and actually gives us an exact date in the future that if the current trend continues, storage will run out. And I had it hooked up to a webhook for Slack. We use Slack, but obviously the same thing stands for Teams, or you could do an email. And then I just put it on a weekly cron, which again, this is amateur hour, so I just ran it from my laptop, but you could run it from a cloud function in AWS or GCP or a hypercore cluster. And then on the bottom here is a real alert that I now get from this, which says, hey, your cluster McPhail patio might reach capacity. Sorry to call you out, Matt McPhail. In October of this year. So you better recover space. I made this message, and it just is populated with different variables. And it actually even includes the link to the cluster that's about to run out, so you can just go and resolve it. Now, that's just one example. I am very confident that everyone in this room could come up with a better use case. This was me, panic coding for this presentation. But I just want to assure you that if I can do it, you can do it. I've got a business degree, so I don't really know what I'm doing, but I love doing it. So the coming soon. So all the stuff that I showed exists. You can use it in Fleet Manager, but in the agenda for this breakout, obviously we teased things that are coming. That's some of the most exciting stuff. So I'm excited to share at a little more length some of the things we covered in the roadmap session this morning, and also some things we didn't. So we're going to do a lot over the next year. I had to limit myself to just 3 things. The first thing, of course, we already showed this morning, which is zero-touch provisioning v2, which brings with it some improved error reporting and recovery. To go into a little more detail, so the example this morning was, hey, I screwed up the backplane VLAN ID, which you can do because you have to type it in. It has to be configured on your switch. That happens a lot. It's a common configuration issue. What's even cooler is if I put in a bad LAN IP, so I'm staging this cluster, it gets shipped out to a store where I might be responsible for the cluster, but somebody else is responsible for the network. They told me, yeah, these are your LAN IPs, you're good to go. I set those as instructed, but it gets to the site and they're wrong. Well, what do I do, right? Now it's bricked, yeah? But actually, in 9.6 now, if it gets to the site, it finds the IPs that were assigned to it are not available for any reason, it will be smart enough to revert back to DHCP and retain communication with Fleet Manager, say, hey, those IPs, they are not working for me, and you can adjust them on the fly and carry on. So really excited about that. CTP is really powerful. Thank you, Nate. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the Authorized Imaging Partner Program. So Mitch talked about this morning. I'm not going to steal the thunder. There's a I believe it's a partners only session tomorrow that Craig will be leading. But for the purposes of this Fleet Manager presentation, I wanted to talk about essentially how you source hardware and how that is going to be changing, or at least you'll be getting additional options in the future. So in Fleet Manager, imagine with me, if you will, you're now on the nodes page and there's an add node button. So today there's not an add node button. Weird. Why is that? It's because we have an integration with our business systems, because pretty much every hypercore node out in the world has been more or less sourced through scale computing. And that's because we have this approved list of appliances. I'm not the hardware expert, but you all know essentially how that works today. And don't get me wrong, that's very convenient. So whether you purchase through a partner, you purchase through Scale directly, etc., Scale knows which hardware was shipped to you, the identifiers, and so it just magically appears in Fleet Manager, which is really cool. That's not going away. What is joining it is the ability to source hardware through an authorized imaging partner, which will give you way more options in terms of hardware, way more flexibility in terms of where you source it, sourcing it locally or from your preferred hardware vendor, like Mitch talked about this morning. And to enable that, in the future, you'll be able to then take that hardware that you sourced from your partner, if you are a partner that you've sourced yourself, right? And you can bring it into Fleet Manager and say, hey, I don't have to notify Scale that I ordered this. I just have to have a software license, and I have to put in a unique primary MAC address of my node, and I should be off and running. So now it's in, and I paid for the license, I have Fleet Manager, and I can now ZTP it. And Scale's none the wiser, and I'm off and running. The third thing I wanted to share is about Project Kraken. So Jeff Reedy showed his Kraken. We have a cuter, cuddly Kraken that's sort of maybe the preference of the team working on it. So zero-touch application deployment is just one part of Project Kraken, but it's the part that's coming very soon. And what that'll enable you to do is deploy workloads to one or really all the clusters in your fleet. So those workloads are, yes, VMs, as you know them today, applications, templates, but it's also containers. It's also in the future Kubernetes workloads. All right, and so to walk through this, I have a recorded demo that I'm going to show you now. So this morning we talked about computer vision. Today we're going to talk about VM template distribution. So I can go into Fleet Manager, I have a deployments tab. I go in here, and instead of a computer vision app, I'm deploying 2 applications to all of these clusters. I've got my Linux template, and I've got my Windows template. And so the Linux template, you can go in here. It's a Fedora CoreOS Linux template, but it could be your preferred distribution. And this manifest, don't let it scare you, right? So these are really, if you were using the HyperCore API, it's pretty much that. The Windows template is a Windows Server 2022. I hit deploy, and now Fleet Manager plus Project Kraken are creating a job for each application to get onto every cluster. So this is a little more in depth than we saw this morning. So you can go in here, you can see live the logs of each job. So this Linux template is getting deployed to store 1, and so I can see timestamps of what's actually happening there on the cluster. Obviously, that's convenient, but you don't have to trust it. You can also go secure link to that cluster, and you can see your templates getting distributed in real time. So again, unlike the computer vision, it's a template, so you're not booting it up. It's just there for you to then clone and use. What you'll notice here is the Linux template is done, and now without any additional clicks, Fleet Manager and Kraken are now deploying that Windows template that you also queued up. So now they're both there on all the stores. And next up, we can see in Fleet Manager, all green, all good. And I can go in, I can change the disk size, clone it, and then add some CPU cores so that it's bootable. And I'm off and running. And then it'll just show opening it up. Voila. So we're really excited about this. We've heard for many years, like, we want VM templates, we want the ability to distribute them quickly. And so I'm really excited. It's like not as flashy, right, as an AI Docker container, but I'm really excited for what that's going to bring to all our customers and partners. All right. And so that's the video demo. And then I have a final, I told you I was QR code happy. So I have a final survey. Just curious, those are 3 things I showed. They're not everything, but I would love to get your feedback on which one of those is most interesting to you. And that can help us know to reach out. Obviously, when we reach out for early access, you can say, nah, I was just being nice on this survey. But we will reach out to you and get it in your hands as soon as possible. And we're really excited to see what you do with it. I'll give it another second for anyone who's still grabbing the QR code. And as a final reminder, so the VM metrics and Fleet Manager API stuff I showed today, those are available today. We hit the button this morning before Scott's roadmap presentation. So I encourage you to get in there, take advantage of that. All right, and if you have questions or feedback, I also posted my email, taylor@skillcomputing.com. And then we have time for any live questions. Yeah.
Is there a way to run Fleet Manager on DARPA site? Is there like a kind of running on a local server?
On-premise Fleet Manager is, currently not an option, but it is something we hear about, and never say never.
Mm-hmm. Question. So I'm an end user, but I spend a lot of my time in the cluster manager at a Fleet Manager. But I like a lot of the visuals to Fleet Manager. Is there ever going to be a thing where some of that's going to move over to the cluster manager? Or does VMs the list view and sorting and everything?
Yeah, so I'm going to commit to people who are not in charge. I'm going to commit my peers. And yes, we are moving in that direction. There are plans for a unification of the UI between Fleet Manager and the cluster UI. And so you'll have a more seamless UI option available soon.
Yep. So the application, is it just deploying a template, but then it's not actually starting the VM? I guess that's maybe trying to understand exactly. And you push that on, then the end of Corona and it was started. Is there any way to like automate actually like starting the VMs once you push those templates out?
Yeah. So when you deploy the template, there are options within that manifest to say, do I want the end state of this VM to be running or to be off? And so for a template, the story being told there is, well, it's off until you want to clone it and use it. But you absolutely can also say deploy it and boot it up as well.
Is that similar to like a Docker, like it would very Docker-esque the way that you guys spread that out? Is that your own format will have its own sort of documentation with it, or you borrow?
Yes. So we're trying not to reinvent the wheel, right? So we don't want to have to put you through a training class for like, oh, here's how Kraken manifests work. We borrowed a lot, first of all, from the Hypercore API. So at the end of the day, we're creating VMs remotely. We're pulling down the media. We're doing a lot of like extra magic, but at the end of the day, we're trying to keep it simple. And we've drawn a lot of inspiration, from Docker files and equivalent.
A lot of those base images be snapshots that you then, or well, like how's actually like image management or like point to offsite stuff, or is it an already actively UI block cluster?
No, it can be. It's a URL essentially. Okay. So you say my image is hosted here. My cloud storage API.
So it could be anywhere. It could be local. Could get
Yeah, absolutely. And you could export it from a Hypercore cluster, put it there, let the other clusters pull it down. Yeah.
So for some setup to this question, so pertaining for site, but for us, zero-touch provisioning has unfortunately never worked. We've done a few 153 clusters, but one of the 3 nodes has always had a mismatch in the Hypercore firmware, so it just didn't join correctly. I'm curious if the new version of zero-touch provisioning will account for that and kind of try to match it before it tries itself.
Can I call you up here, Nate? No, I mean, there's a reason we're doing V2, right? So there's an acknowledgement built into that. That V1 is really cool, but is ready for an update. We want it to always work. And that includes ensuring that there's not that firmware mismatch. It also includes like even software license mismatch could occur. We want to be covering those edge cases as well with V2.
Great. So my bad. It says it complete. Can you please the complex to reflect its PS? But if you make J, so okay.
Yes. All right. I'm glad you're thinking ahead. So Project Kraken is broader. So the question was, after you deploy it, can you make a change? Yeah. So right now, zero-touch application deployment is that initial creation step. But absolutely, the vision for Kraken is that this is application lifecycle management. So yeah, I deployed this VM to 400 stores, and now I realize, I updated the application, and now it needs more CPU or it needs a larger disk. I want to just be able to go back into my manifest, update that, hit deploy again. And so that is on the long-term roadmap for Kraken. All right. I think I'm out of time, but just a reminder, my email's there. Please reach out, and of course, I'll be here the rest of the week. Thank you so much for coming.